What happens when the most patient man in professional football finally reaches his breaking point? Myles Garrett has spent years being the model teammate. He's endured losing seasons without complaint. He's watched quarterbacks come and go like revolving doors. He's dominated on the field while the organization around him crumbled. And through all of it, he kept his mouth shut, did his job, and represented the Cleveland Browns with nothing but class and professionalism. That era just ended. In a press conference that left reporters stunned and sent shockwaves through the entire NFL, Garrett did something nobody expected. He told the truth. Not the watered-down, media-trained version of truth that athletes usually deliver. The real thing, raw, unfiltered, devastating. He publicly admitted that his time under Kevin Stefanski has been defined by failure. He revealed that the front office blindsided him on major decisions they supposedly wanted his input on. He exposed broken promises from ownership. And most critically, he issued an ultimatum that should have every single person in that Browns building losing sleep tonight. This wasn't subtle criticism hidden behind diplomatic language. This was a franchise cornerstone, making it crystal clear that his patience has expired and his future in Cleveland is no longer guaranteed. What Garrett said in those 18 minutes changes everything. And it starts with understanding just how much weight his words carry. To truly grasp the magnitude of what just happened, you need to understand exactly who Myles Garrett is and why his words carry more weight than perhaps any other player in the entire league right now. This isn't some disgruntled backup complaining about playing time. This isn't a fading veteran trying to stay relevant. This is the first overall pick of the 2017 NFL Draft. A generational talent who has lived up to every ounce of hype that surrounded him coming out of Texas A&M, a player who has transformed himself into one of the most dominant defensive forces the game has ever seen. Garrett has been selected to the Pro Bowl 5 times. Let that sink in for a moment. 5 times he's been recognized as one of the absolute best at his position. He won the Defensive Player of the Year award in 2023, cementing his status among the elite of the elite. His sack numbers are staggering. His ability to wreck game plans and alter offensive strategies just by being on the field is something coordinators across the league have nightmares about. But here's what makes Garrett truly special and why this press conference matters so much. He's done all of this while playing for one of the most dysfunctional franchises in professional sports. Think about the chaos this man has witnessed since arriving in Cleveland. The quarterback carousel alone would have driven most players insane. Deshaun Kaiser, Tyrod Taylor, Baker Mayfield, Jacoby Brissett, Deshaun Watson, Joe Flacco. The list goes on and on. While other elite defenders get to rush the passer knowing their offense can keep them in games, Garrett has had to carry an almost impossible burden. He's had to be perfect because the margin for error with Cleveland's offensive struggles has been essentially zero. And through all of it, what did Garrett do? He kept quiet. He showed up to work every single day. He dominated his position. He said all the right things in press conferences and never threw teammates or coaches under the bus. When the Browns went through their embarrassing stretches, Garrett remained the consummate professional. When other players might have demanded trades or aired grievances publicly, he simply put his head down and continued producing at a Hall of Fame level. That patience is what makes this press conference so significant. This is a man who has earned the right to speak through years of silence. He's cashed in every chip of credibility by being the one constant in an organization that couldn't figure anything else out. The Browns have changed coaches. They've changed quarterbacks. They've changed schemes and philosophies and front office personnel. The only thing that has remained consistently excellent is Myles Garrett. When a player like this finally decides to open up, you better believe every word matters. This isn't frustration born from a bad game or a tough loss. This is years of accumulated disappointment finally boiling over. This is a man watching his prime years slip away while the organization around him fails to provide the support he needs to compete for championships. Garrett is 29 years old. For a pass rusher of his caliber, he probably has 4 or 5 elite seasons remaining. Maybe a few more if he stays healthy and the football gods are kind. That window isn't infinite. Every season that ends without a playoff appearance is a season wasted. Every year that concludes with organizational dysfunction instead of championship contention is a year Garrett will never get back. He knows this. He feels the clock ticking. And for the first time in his career, he's making it publicly known that he's not willing to waste whatever time he has left on a team that isn't serious about winning. The respect Garrett commands within that locker room cannot be overstated. When he speaks, players listen. When he leads, others follow. He's not just the best player on the roster. He's the emotional heartbeat of the entire franchise. Losing him wouldn't just hurt the Browns on the field. It would send a message to every other player that this organization doesn't value its stars and can't be trusted to build a winner. That's the context you need heading into the rest of this breakdown. The man who just unloaded on his organization has earned every right to do so. And what he revealed should terrify everyone associated with the Cleveland Browns. Sometimes the most revealing moments in a press conference happen before anyone asks a meaningful question. The way a player sits. The energy in their voice. The look in their eyes. These small details often tell you more than any prepared statement ever could. When Myles Garrett walked up to that podium, something was different. This wasn't the confident, measured presence that reporters had grown accustomed to over the years. There was a heaviness to him, a weariness that seemed to radiate from every movement. Before he even opened his mouth, you could sense that whatever was coming wouldn't be the typical athlete routine of deflecting questions and protecting the organization. The first question was simple enough. How are you doing? It's the kind of softball that usually gets batted away with generic positivity. Great. Feeling good. Ready for next season. That's what players are trained to say. That's what the media relations people script for them. Garrett's response cut through all of that pretense immediately. It's been kind of up and down, but it's fine. Read that again. Let those words settle. The franchise cornerstone of the Cleveland Browns just admitted that things have been rocky, and his only reassurance was a half-hearted claim that everything is fine. That's not the language of a satisfied player. That's not how someone speaks when they're excited about where their team is headed. That's exhaustion wrapped in the thinnest veneer of professionalism. The brevity itself was telling. Garrett is known for being thoughtful and articulate. He takes his time with answers and provides genuine insight when he speaks. This response felt almost dismissive, not because he didn't care about the question, but because he didn't have the energy to pretend everything was wonderful when it clearly wasn't. Then came the pivot to confidence. Garrett mentioned that his belief in himself hasn't wavered. He talked about not focusing on what might go wrong and instead concentrating on making things go right. On the surface, this sounds like the mental toughness you'd expect from an elite competitor. Dig a little deeper, and a different picture emerges. Why does a player of Garrett's caliber feel the need to reassure everyone that his confidence is still intact? Why is he talking about maintaining his mental state when nobody asked about it specifically? The answer is simple. He's working overtime to keep himself together while everything around him falls apart. This is what psychological strain looks like in professional athletes. They can't admit weakness directly. They can't say they're struggling mentally because that becomes a headline and a distraction. So instead, they overcompensate with forced positivity. They emphasize how strong they still feel precisely because they're fighting to maintain that strength every single day. Garrett has been carrying the weight of a dysfunctional franchise on his shoulders for years. He's been the one constant in an organization that can't seem to get anything else right. That kind of pressure takes a toll. It doesn't matter how talented you are or how mentally tough you've proven yourself to be. Eventually, the burden becomes almost unbearable. What we witnessed in those opening moments was a man running on fumes. Someone who has given everything to a team that hasn't given enough back. The enthusiasm that once defined his press conferences has been replaced by something closer to resignation. He's still showing up. He's still saying the right things when required. But the spark that used to be there has dimmed considerably. The contrast with previous seasons is striking. Go back and watch Garrett's pressers from years past. You'll see a player who genuinely believed good things were coming. A guy who could find optimism even in difficult circumstances. That version of Myles Garrett has been worn down by repeated disappointment and broken promises. What remained at that podium was a shell of that optimism. A man going through the motions because that's what professionals do. He answered questions. He maintained composure. But anyone paying attention could see that something fundamental had shifted in how he views this organization and his place within it. And that was just the opening exchange. The warm-up before the real revelations began. Because when reporters started asking about specific people and specific decisions, Garrett stopped holding back entirely. Every head coach in professional football understands that their job security ultimately depends on one thing: not wins and losses alone, not media approval or fan satisfaction. What truly determines whether a coach survives is the support of his best players. When the locker room believes in you, you can survive rough patches and rebuild trust with ownership. When you lose the locker room, especially the players who matter most, your days are numbered. Kevin Stefanski just lost Myles Garrett, and it happened on live television for the entire world to witness. The moment came when a reporter asked Garrett to reflect on his experience playing under Stefanski over the past several seasons. It wasn't a particularly aggressive question, just a straightforward inquiry about what it's been like working with the head coach during his tenure in Cleveland. What happened next will be replayed and analyzed for years to come. There was a pause, not a brief hesitation while gathering thoughts. A genuine pause where you could almost see Garrett wrestling with himself. How honest should he be? How much truth can he reveal without completely torching the relationship? Where's the line between diplomatic criticism and outright condemnation? He found that line, then he stepped right over it. My experience, like anything, we've had ups and downs. Unfortunately, more downs than ups. 6 words, more downs than ups. That's all it took to effectively end Kevin Stefanski's credibility as the leader of this football team. Coming from any other player, this might be dismissed as frustration or sour grapes. Coming from Myles Garrett, the most respected voice in that entire building, it lands like a sledgehammer. Try to imagine the restraint required to deliver that statement so calmly. Garrett didn't raise his voice. He didn't pound the table or show visible anger. He simply stated a fact as he sees it. His time playing for Kevin Stefanski has been characterized by more failure than success, more disappointment than joy, more wasted potential than realized dreams. The elegance of the phrasing makes it even more devastating. Garrett acknowledged that there have been some positive moments. He didn't claim everything has been terrible. But by qualifying it with "unfortunately" and emphasizing that the negatives outweigh the positives, he made his position unmistakably clear. This coaching tenure has not worked out. The results speak for themselves. Garrett continued his assessment by expressing what could have been. He talked about wanting to make more noise in different years. He specifically mentioned this most recent season and how well the defense performed. There was genuine pain in his words. A recognition that the pieces were there for something special, but the organization failed to put them together properly. And here's where the criticism becomes impossible for Stefanski to escape. The defense held up their end of the bargain. Garrett and his teammates on that side of the ball have been dominant. They've given the Browns every opportunity to win games and compete for playoff spots. The unit has ranked among the best in the entire league year after year. So where did things fall apart? The offense, the side of the ball that Stefanski is supposed to specialize in. The area where his expertise was supposed to elevate Cleveland from pretender to contender. Instead of maximizing the window that Garrett and the defense created, the offensive side of the operation has consistently let them down. Garrett didn't name names beyond Stefanski. He didn't need to. Everyone watching understood exactly what he was saying. The defense did their job. The coaching and organizational decisions around them did not. And the person ultimately responsible for how this team performs on the field is the head coach. When pressed about whether success was possible if things remain as they are, Garrett's response revealed even deeper doubts. He admitted he doesn't know what the future holds. He said he can't predict whether things would work out with Stefanski or with anyone else. The uncertainty in his voice was palpable. But notice what was missing from his answer. Any endorsement of Stefanski whatsoever. Any suggestion that he believes the current coach can turn things around. Any indication that he wants Stefanski to remain in charge. The absence of support is itself a statement. Garrett will play for whoever the Browns put in charge. He made that clear, but he's not going to pretend that keeping things the same will somehow produce different results. That kind of delusion isn't in his nature. He sees what everyone else sees. The Stefanski era has failed to deliver what it promised. Yet as damaging as those comments were for the head coach, they weren't even the most explosive revelation of the press conference. Because what Garrett exposed about the front office would make the Stefanski criticism look gentle by comparison. Trust is everything in professional sports. Players need to trust that their coaches are putting them in positions to succeed. Coaches need to trust that their players will execute the game plan. And everyone within an organization needs to trust that the front office understands what they're doing and will communicate major decisions that affect the entire team. That trust just evaporated in Cleveland. And the way it happened exposes a level of organizational dysfunction that goes far beyond coaching philosophy or scheme fit. Before dropping the bombshell that would rock the entire franchise, Garrett addressed his off-season conversations with ownership. He confirmed that yes, he did sit down with Jimmy Haslam and general manager Andrew Barry. Yes, they laid out their vision for how the Browns would contend. Yes, they made promises about the direction of the roster and what steps they'd take to build a winner. When asked if management held true to what they told him, Garrett's response was gracious to a fault. He acknowledged that maybe some things didn't quite work out as planned, but emphasized that he couldn't hold too much against them because nobody can see the future. Plans change. Circumstances shift. Not everything works out exactly as anticipated. That answer showcased the kind of maturity and professionalism that has defined Garrett's career. He wasn't interested in dragging ownership through the mud over promises that fell through. He understood that running an NFL franchise involves countless variables that don't always align perfectly. He was willing to give them grace for the things outside their control. But then, the reporter asked the question that would crack everything wide open. Garrett had known about the plan to bring back Joe Flacco. Management kept him in the loop on that decision. So how surprised was he when they pivoted and traded for a different quarterback instead? A move that clearly had significant impact on how the season unfolded. Garrett's response should send shockwaves through every corner of the Browns organization. I was surprised as everyone else. I didn't know about the news until everyone else did. Stop everything and process what just got revealed. The Cleveland Browns executed a major trade that would directly impact their most important players' ability to win games. A franchise-altering decision that shifted the entire trajectory of their season. And they didn't tell Myles Garrett about it beforehand. They didn't give him a heads up. They didn't even have the courtesy to inform him before it became public knowledge. He found out the same way fans did, through media reports, through Twitter notifications, through the same rumor mill and breaking news alerts that reach everyone with a smartphone. The supposed franchise cornerstone, the guy they claimed to build around, was left completely in the dark. Garrett continued his answer by explaining that he was just trying to figure out what the plan was and how they'd make it work, just like everyone else scrambling to understand the decision after it had already been made. He had to adapt on the fly to a major roster change without any preparation or insight into the thinking behind it. This is organizational malpractice at the highest level. You simply cannot operate a successful franchise when you're keeping your best players in the dark about decisions that affect them directly. It's one thing to make a bold move that doesn't work out. That happens in sports. Front offices take calculated risks and sometimes they backfire. That's part of the job. But to make that move without even informing the player you supposedly consult with on major decisions, that's not just a mistake. That's a fundamental breakdown in communication and respect. It reveals an organization operating in chaos where different departments aren't coordinating and where the supposed chain of communication exists only in theory. Think about what this means for Andrew Barry's credibility. The general manager who claims to value Garrett's input apparently doesn't value it enough to keep him informed about significant roster changes. Barry talks a good game about building around core players and creating a winning culture. But when the moment comes to actually include those core players in major decisions, he leaves them completely out of the loop. And this isn't just on Barry. Jimmy Haslam owns this franchise. He's the one who sat down with Garrett in the offseason and laid out the vision. He's the one ultimately responsible for how the organization operates. If his general manager is making trades without informing the team's best player, that's a reflection of leadership failure at the very top. Garrett's professionalism in that moment was remarkable. He could have exploded. He could have expressed outrage at being disrespected so blatantly. Instead, he simply stated the facts and moved on. But make no mistake, that kind of treatment leaves scars. It erodes trust in ways that can't easily be repaired. The question becomes, how does a player maintain his composure and continue performing at an elite level when the organization around him operates with such dysfunction? The answer revealed just how heavy the burden has become. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from doing everything right while watching everything around you fall apart. It's not physical fatigue. It's not the soreness that comes from training camp or the bruises accumulated over a 17-game season. It's the mental and emotional drain of carrying a burden that should be distributed across an entire organization, but instead rests almost entirely on your shoulders. Myles Garrett has been living with that weight for years, and during the press conference, you could hear it in every word he spoke. When asked how he's managed to rise above the frustration and maintain his performance despite the chaos surrounding him, Garrett's response revealed the toll that professionalism takes when everything else is crumbling. He talked about having a job to do regardless of what's happening with the offense, special teams, or even the lapses on defense. He emphasized that he has to be the same person every single time he walks into the facility and every time he steps on the field. That consistency isn't natural. It's not easy. It requires an enormous amount of mental energy to show up with the same intensity day after day when you're watching management make decisions that blindside you and coaches fail to produce results that match the talent on the roster. Most people would crack under that pressure. Most would let their frustration seep into their performance or their relationships with teammates. Garrett hasn't allowed that to happen. He talked about expecting the same energy from himself, making plays, speaking to the team, motivating and inspiring others, leading by example no matter what else is going wrong. He made it clear that he can't afford to lapse just because things aren't going well. Listen to the burden contained in those words. Garrett has placed the responsibility of maintaining team morale and culture squarely on his own shoulders. When the organization fails, when the coaching falls short, when promises get broken, he's the one who has to pick everyone up and keep them focused. That's not in his job description as a defensive end. That's what head coaches and general managers are supposed to handle. But when those people don't do their jobs effectively, someone has to fill the void. And Garrett has filled it because that's who he is. He's a leader. He refuses to let his personal frustrations become an excuse for lowering his standards or abandoning his teammates. The mental toughness required to maintain that approach is staggering. Think about what Garrett experiences on a weekly basis. He dominates his matchups. He terrorizes quarterbacks. He puts up numbers that will eventually land him in Canton. And then he watches the offense sputter. He sees the coaching decisions that don't make sense. He witnesses the organizational dysfunction that prevents all his individual excellence from translating into team success. That's soul-crushing. Imagine putting everything you have into your craft, working harder than anyone else, performing at a level that only a handful of people in the world can match, and then watching it all amount to nothing because the people around you can't hold up their end of the bargain. Garrett has posted double-digit sacks in multiple seasons. He's wrecked game plans and forced opposing coordinators to completely adjust their approach just to account for him. He's been the one player that teams have to game plan around every single week. And what has it gotten him? No playoff victories. No deep postseason runs. No championships. Individual accolades only mean so much. Pro Bowl selections and Defensive Player of the Year awards are nice. They validate the work and provide recognition among peers. But they don't fill the void that comes from watching your prime years disappear without team success to show for it. Garrett understands this reality better than anyone. He knows that when his career is over, people won't remember how many times he made the Pro Bowl. They'll remember whether he won championships, whether his team competed for titles, whether all that individual dominance actually mattered in the grand scheme of things. Right now, the answer to those questions is devastating. All his excellence has produced exactly 0 playoff wins. All his leadership has resulted in another season watching the playoffs from home. All his patience and professionalism has earned him broken promises and organizational dysfunction. And yet, he keeps showing up. He keeps performing at an elite level. He keeps carrying the weight because that's what professionals do. But here's the thing about carrying impossible burdens for extended periods. Eventually, something has to give. Eventually, even the strongest person reaches their limit. During the press conference, Garrett made it abundantly clear that he's reached his. And what came next should make everyone in the Browns organization realize just how serious this situation has become. Most player ultimatums come wrapped in agent speak and carefully crafted statements designed to apply pressure without burning bridges. They're strategic leaks to trusted reporters about unhappiness. They're vague comments about wanting to compete that leave room for interpretation. They're subtle enough that both sides can walk them back if necessary. What Myles Garrett delivered wasn't subtle. It wasn't coded. It wasn't designed to leave wiggle room for interpretation. It was the most direct statement of conditional commitment you'll ever hear from a professional athlete while still under contract. When asked about his future with the organization, Garrett could have deflected. He could have said all the right things about being committed to Cleveland and trusting the process and believing in the direction. That's what players are supposed to do. That's the safe play that keeps everyone happy and avoids uncomfortable headlines. Instead, Garrett drew a line in the sand that changes everything. I'm committed to winning, and as long as the team and organization are doing so and they're committed to that same thing, I'm all on board. But if we're doing anything other than winning, if there's tanking or rebuilding, that's not me. Read those words again. Let them settle. Myles Garrett just told the Cleveland Browns ownership, management, and coaching staff exactly what his continued presence requires. Win now. Compete immediately. Build a roster capable of contending for championships right now. Anything less and he's gone. This isn't a player hoping things get better eventually. This isn't someone willing to be patient while the organization figures things out. This is a 29-year-old superstar in the absolute prime of his career, making it crystal clear that he has no interest in wasting whatever time he has left on developmental projects or rebuilding phases. The specific mention of tanking and rebuilding is particularly important. Garrett isn't just saying he wants to win. Every player says that. He's explicitly rejecting the two paths that struggling franchises often take when things aren't working. He's telling management that if their plan involves taking a step backward to eventually move forward, count him out. If they're thinking about tearing things down to rebuild around younger pieces, he wants no part of it. That's as close to trade demand as you can get without actually requesting a trade. Garrett is essentially saying the Browns have one choice: go all in on winning immediately or prepare to trade him to a team that will. The urgency in his statement reflects the reality of his situation. Pass rushers have a limited window of elite performance. The physical demands of the position take a brutal toll over time. Garrett has maybe 4 or 5 more years of being the dominant force he is right now. Maybe a bit longer if everything breaks right with health and conditioning. But that window won't stay open forever. Every season that ends without a playoff run is a season Garrett will never get back. Every year that concludes with organizational dysfunction instead of championship contention is a year removed from his prime. He's acutely aware of this ticking clock, and he's done pretending like there's unlimited time to figure things out. Think about what Garrett has already sacrificed for this franchise. He's given them 6 years of Hall of Fame-level production. He's endured coaching changes, quarterback carousels, and front office dysfunction. He's been patient when other superstars in his position would have demanded out years ago. He's represented the organization with class and professionalism even when they didn't deserve it. And what has he gotten in return? Broken promises. Decisions made without his input despite claims that his opinion matters. A coaching staff that has produced more downs than ups. And another season ending without meaningful football in January. Garrett has earned the right to demand better. He's paid his dues. He's proven his loyalty. And now he's making it clear that loyalty has limits. The Browns can either match his commitment to winning or watch him take his talents somewhere that will. The pressure this puts on ownership and management cannot be overstated. Jimmy Haslam and Andrew Barry now face a decision that will define the next era of Browns football. They can make the aggressive moves necessary to build an immediate contender, which almost certainly means significant changes to coaching and roster construction. Or they can stay the course with their current approach and risk losing the best defensive player this franchise has had in decades. There's no middle ground here. No compromise position that satisfies everyone. Garrett has made his requirements perfectly clear, and the consequences of failing to meet them are equally obvious. But the options available for satisfying his demand might be more complicated than anyone realizes. Sometimes what a player doesn't say speaks just as loudly as what they do. And sometimes the contrast between two different answers to similar questions reveals more truth than any direct statement ever could. When Myles Garrett was asked about Jim Schwartz, the defensive coordinator who's been instrumental in building Cleveland's elite defense, the difference in tone and substance compared to his Stefanski comments was impossible to miss. The The question was straightforward enough. What would it be like playing under Jim Schwartz as a head coach compared to his current situation? It gave Garrett an opportunity to deflect, to give a non-answer about not knowing what the future holds. And to his credit, he did start by saying he can't predict what it would be like, but then he kept talking, and what came next was incredibly revealing. I know it would be regimented and probably very efficient. That's how he runs it on defense. Those two words, regimented, efficient, they carry so much weight when you consider the context. Garrett is praising Schwartz for the exact qualities that have been missing from the broader organizational approach under Stefanski. He's highlighting discipline and effectiveness, structure and results, the things that actually matter when you're trying to build a championship team. The certainty in his voice when discussing Schwartz stood in stark contrast to his uncertainty about everything else. He doesn't know what the future holds with Stefanski. He can't say whether success is possible if things stay the same, but he knows exactly what Schwartz brings to the table. Discipline, efficiency, results. That's not accidental language. Garrett chose those specific words because they reflect what he's experienced working under Schwartz on a daily basis. The defensive side of the ball in Cleveland has been a model of consistency and excellence. They've ranked among the league's best year after year. They've developed players. They've adapted schemes. They've executed at a high level regardless of what's happening on the other side of the ball. All of that falls under Schwartz's leadership, and Garrett recognizes it, values it, respects it enough to publicly acknowledge it when given the opportunity. Now contrast that with every single thing Garrett said about Stefanski: more downs than ups, uncertainty about the future, inability to predict success if things remain unchanged. The difference in confidence couldn't be more obvious. Garrett trusts Schwartz to run a tight operation that produces results. He doesn't have that same trust in Stefanski's overall leadership. The implications of this comparison are massive for the Browns' decision-making process. If ownership is serious about keeping Garrett happy and committed to the franchise, they just got handed a blueprint. Promote Jim Schwartz to head coach. Keep the defensive continuity that's been working. Bring in an offensive coordinator who can actually maximize the talent on that side of the ball. And compete immediately with a proven leader who already has Garrett's respect and confidence. It's not a complicated formula. Schwartz has been a head coach before with the Detroit Lions. He knows what the job entails. He's already leading half the team with demonstrated success. And most importantly, the franchise player just essentially endorsed him in a press conference watched by millions. But here's where things get tricky. Garrett was careful not to explicitly demand Schwartz be promoted. He talked about liking the coaches they currently have. He mentioned wanting to keep the team together and improve. He emphasized that these decisions are made by people above his pay grade, and he'll work with whoever management puts in charge. That diplomatic language provides cover for everyone involved. Garrett isn't publicly undermining Stefanski or staging a coaching coup. He's simply answering questions honestly and letting the contrast speak for itself. Management can't claim he's being insubordinate or creating unnecessary drama. He's being professional while making his preferences abundantly clear. Yet the message couldn't be more obvious if Garrett had written it in neon letters. The defensive coordinator has his full confidence. The head coach does not. One leader runs a regimented, efficient operation that produces elite results. The other has presided over an era characterized by more downs than ups. The question is whether Browns' ownership will read between the lines and act accordingly. Do they recognize that Garrett just gave them a solution to the crisis they're facing? Do they understand that promoting Schwartz could satisfy Garrett's demand for winning while maintaining defensive continuity? Or will they ignore the obvious signals and make a decision that pushes their franchise player closer to the exit? Everything depends on what happens next. The conversations, the meetings, the critical decisions that will either keep this core together or blow it all apart. Press conferences reveal a lot. They expose frustrations that have been building for months or years. They provide glimpses into locker room dynamics and organizational dysfunction. They create headlines and drive conversations across sports media for days afterward. But the real decisions don't happen in front of cameras and microphones. They happen behind closed doors in conference rooms where the people who actually control the franchise hash out uncomfortable truths and make choices that alter the course of history. Those meetings are coming, and Myles Garrett made sure everyone knows it. Near the end of his press conference, Garrett mentioned that there would be extra meetings in the coming days and weeks. Conversations about how things went. Discussions about what the future looks like. Opportunities for everyone to sit down and be completely honest about where the organization stands and where it needs to go. That's corporate speak for we're about to have some extremely difficult conversations that will determine whether I stay here or demand out. Imagine what those meetings will look like. Jimmy Haslam sitting across from his franchise player, trying to explain decisions that left Garrett blindsided and frustrated. Andrew Barry attempting to rebuild trust after keeping his best player in the dark about major roster moves. Kevin Stefanski facing the reality that the team's most important defensive player just publicly stated that his tenure has been defined by failure. There's no playbook for navigating those conversations. No script that makes everything okay. The damage has been done. The truth has been spoken. Now comes the hard part of figuring out whether the relationship can be salvaged or if it's time to acknowledge that things have broken beyond repair. For ownership, these meetings represent a moment of reckoning. They can no longer pretend everything is fine or that minor adjustments will solve the problems. Garrett has made his position unmistakably clear. He wants to win immediately. He has no interest in rebuilding or developmental timelines. He expects the organization to match his commitment to excellence, or he's exploring other options. Haslam has to decide what he values more: stability and continuity with the current regime, or keeping the best defensive player the Browns have had in franchise history. He can't have both. Garrett's ultimatum eliminates the possibility of middle ground solutions that satisfy everyone. If Haslam chooses to keep Stefanski and stay the course with the current organizational structure, he's essentially betting that he can convince Garrett to be patient for one more season. That's a massive gamble. Garrett has already been patient for 6 years. He's watched promises get broken and opportunities slip away. One more year of the same approach isn't likely to change his mind or renew his faith in the organization. The alternative is making dramatic changes. Firing Stefanski despite his regular season record, potentially promoting Schwartz to head coach, making aggressive roster moves that signal an all-in commitment to winning immediately. That path comes with its own risks and uncertainties. But it's the only path that aligns with what Garrett explicitly stated he needs. For Andrew Barry, these meetings will be equally uncomfortable. The general manager has to explain why he made a significant trade without informing the franchise player who supposedly has input on major decisions. He has to justify broken promises from the offseason when he and Haslam laid out their vision for contention. And he has to convince Garrett that despite all the missteps, the front office actually knows what it's doing and can deliver the winning environment Garrett demands. That's an almost impossible sell at this point. Trust isn't rebuilt through PowerPoint presentations and reassurances. It's rebuilt through actions that demonstrate you've learned from your mistakes and won't repeat them. Barry needs to show Garrett that things will be fundamentally different going forward, not just tweaked or slightly improved. Fundamentally different. And for Stefanski, these meetings might be the last conversations he has as Browns head coach. How do you recover when your best player publicly states that his experience under your leadership has been more downs than ups? How do you convince someone to give you another chance when they've made it clear they don't believe you can lead them to where they want to go? The honest answer is you probably can't. Once that level of confidence has eroded, it's nearly impossible to rebuild. Stefanski can point to his regular season record. He can highlight the challenges with quarterback situations and injuries. He can promise that next year will be different, but Garrett has heard all of that before, and it hasn't translated into the playoff success that actually matters. The clock is ticking on these decisions. Free agency approaches. The draft looms. Other teams are already making moves to improve for next season. The Browns can't afford to sit in organizational paralysis while trying to figure out what to do. Every day of indecision is another day that Garrett's frustration grows and his patience diminishes. Everything comes down to what happens in those conference rooms. The hard conversations. The difficult admissions. The choices that will either salvage this situation or confirm that the relationship has run its course. And the entire future of the Cleveland Browns hangs in the balance. The Cleveland Browns are standing at the edge of a cliff, and Myles Garrett just told them exactly what happens if they take another step forward without changing direction. This wasn't just another frustrated player venting about a disappointing season. This was a calculated dismantling of an entire organizational structure by the one person who has earned the right to do it. Garrett didn't lose his composure. He didn't scream or make demands. He simply told the truth in a way that leaves no room for misinterpretation or denial. Think about everything that got exposed in those 18 minutes. A head coach whose best player admits has delivered more failure than success. A front office that makes franchise-altering decisions without informing the players who matter most. Ownership that makes promises they can't or won't keep. And a superstar who has finally reached the end of his patience with all of it. The crossroads facing Cleveland right now isn't just about whether to fire a coach or make a trade. It's about what kind of franchise they want to be. Do they want to be the organization that had Myles Garrett and let him walk because they couldn't get out of their own way? Or do they want to be the team that recognized the urgency of the moment and made the bold moves necessary to maximize a generational talent's prime years? History will judge this moment harshly if they get it wrong. We've seen this story before in professional sports. Superstar players reaching their breaking point with dysfunctional organizations. Some franchises wake up and make the necessary changes. They fire coaches, restructure front offices, and recommit to winning. Others stay stubborn, refuse to acknowledge the problems, and watch their best players leave for teams that actually know how to compete. The Detroit Lions watched Barry Sanders retire early rather than continue wasting his career. The Houston Texans let J.J. Watt's prime slip away without ever truly contending. The Angels are currently watching Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani's careers get squandered by organizational incompetence. These cautionary tales exist all across professional sports. Franchises that had everything they needed to succeed, but couldn't get out of their own way long enough to actually do it. Cleveland is about to join that list unless they treat this press conference as the wake-up call it needs to be. Garrett didn't just express frustration. He provided a roadmap. He values efficiency and regiment. He wants immediate contention, not long-term projects. He respects coaches like Schwartz who produce results. He has no patience for anything that resembles tanking or rebuilding. The solution seems obvious from the outside looking in. Make the coaching change. Promote Schwartz or bring in someone with a proven track record of winning. Be transparent with your franchise player about major decisions. Stop making promises you can't keep. And most importantly, go all in on winning right now while you still have an elite talent who can anchor your defense. But obvious solutions aren't always easy to execute. Egos get involved. Contracts complicate things. Owners hate admitting they made mistakes. General managers protect their own positions. Coaches fight for one more chance. The politics of professional sports can prevent even the most necessary changes from happening. Yet none of those complications matter compared to what happens if Garrett walks. Losing him wouldn't just hurt the defense. It would send a message to every current player and potential free agent that Cleveland isn't serious about winning. It would confirm every negative stereotype about the Browns being a place where careers go to die. It would set the franchise back years, maybe decades. The ultimate tragedy here is that none of this needed to happen. The Browns had all the pieces. They had an elite defense anchored by a future Hall of Famer. They had resources to build around him. They had opportunities to make the right decisions. But at every crucial moment, they chose dysfunction over discipline, chaos over clarity, mediocrity over excellence. Now they're paying the price for those choices. Not in wins and losses, though those have been bad enough. They're paying with the trust and confidence of the one player they absolutely cannot afford to lose. And once that trust is gone, once that patience runs out, there's no salary cap manipulation or draft pick package that can replace what walks out the door. Myles Garrett gave the Cleveland Browns 6 years of his prime. He gave them leadership, excellence, and professionalism even when they didn't deserve it. He carried the franchise on his back through some of the darkest moments in team history. And all he's asking for in return is an organization committed to winning at the same level he's committed to playing. That shouldn't be too much to ask. But for the Cleveland Browns, it might be impossible to deliver. And if it is, if they can't rise to meet this moment, then Garrett will find a team that can. A team that understands what they have. A team that won't waste his talent. A team that actually knows how to win. The meetings are coming. The decisions will be made. And everything about the future of this franchise hangs in the balance. Garrett has drawn his line in the sand. Now we wait to see which side of it the Browns choose to stand on. Because make no mistake, there's no walking back from what just happened. The truth is out there. The ultimatum has been delivered. And the clock on Myles Garrett's time in Cleveland is ticking louder than ever.